Hey, okay, so we're back live. I'm gonna tag Monique in this one. Hold on just a second. Talk for me.
So what we're going to be doing is talking a little bit more in depth about homeschooling, because as you guys know, lives usually lag on the end of the person that is recording it, so we didn't get a lot of the questions, but we were informed that we did receive some good ones, and this is a topic that a lot of people are interested in, so we are going to go a little bit in depth because she has homeschooled, I have been homeschooled, and we have been in public school. And she has been a parent of both. So we are going to see what we can tell you guys and what will be helpful and what will not be helpful.
Okay, so here's kind of how we do it, and we'll try to do it really quickly. We won't take too much time, maybe about 15-20 minutes, but really as a Q&A. So we'll talk about, just briefly, we can give an overview about some of the things that I thought was successful in homeschooling. And then if you all have any questions, please go ahead and ask them, and hopefully we'll answer them. So one of the comments after the live we just finished was, homeschooling can be stressful for parents and children. And I think it was kind of like inquiring for more information. So little background, and then we'll answer that question. I homeschooled my 3 for about 4 years, and that spanned an age range or a grade range because I also homeschooled with some other people, and I homeschooled other families' children for them. So I did homeschool longer than that, but I homeschooled my own children for 4 years.
For a max of 4 years.
For a max of 4 years. And so that spanned the range of pre-K up to 8th grade. So hitting that whole gamut, probably every year, every group, every age, every grade, pre-K up to 8th grade. And so some of the things, yes, it can be very stressful. One of the things that I often say, though, because yes, it can be stressful for the kids and it can be stressful for the parents, but some of the things that I thought really worked was, number one, I thought the most important thing was separating the space. And Brianna can talk to that, but I'll give just a feedback and then we'll kind of bounce off. Separating the space was very important for me because we homeschooled where we had all the space together, where we used our kitchen area to homeschool. And the challenge that I saw with that, and it was the way our house dynamic, our living quarters worked. So the way that the dynamic of it, though, we never left school. So because it was right there in our living space in the middle of it and it wasn't separate, it was as if they were at school all day. Not because they were doing work, but because their school area encompassed a large part of the living quarters. We eventually, in that place, we were able to separate an area that we could easily clean up so that it's doable in a small space, but we were able to break down that area so that it could transition back into home. And then we had the blessing of being able to move to a house while we were homeschooling. And from there, we had a completely separate space. So if you can do that, that's awesome. A completely separate space so that when our school time was over from what we were doing concentrated work on, we were able to move away from that. That was the best, but that's just not practical for everybody. So if you have the space where you could have a completely separate area that can be designated for school and close off when it's not school hours, that's the way to go. If you have a space that is smaller where you can't separate it, then the best thing to do is have something that is easily transitional. So a folding desk or something that you can put to the side. You want to speak to the space?
I agree with her when saying that you should have a separate space because it's kind of like a mindset. If I play in the same place where I work, then it's not going to be so much of a playing space anymore. If I play the same place where I eat, family dinners are no longer going to become a special time to have with each other, because it's just, we were literally just here 2 hours ago sitting in these exact same seats. Now the only difference is that we're eating, but we eat lunch in these exact same seats. It's just like, you never really leave school, and that's not cool.
And it's really important to have that separate space even when you're homeschooling. So one of the things that's very important to know, homeschooling is different from virtual schooling, and it's definitely different from the traditional brick and mortar going to school. Homeschooling, you are picking your curriculum, you are guiding and facilitating the learning, you're teaching it, you're the instructor, you're doing everything on that. Virtual learning, and you can have a hybrid, of course, but that's where they're in a computer. There is a teacher who is teaching online. Now, it's very important because, or there's a distinguish between some things. There were some computer programmed lessons or apps that they did their math on, but it wasn't a teacher who taught it. So I was still teaching it. Virtual school is a teacher taught on the computer.
Also, it might have been for Evan and Grace, but for me, I got blessed with the best teachers last year. So my math teacher, he was perfect. It was amazing because his lessons, he would always pre-record him solving them, and he would always pre-record them while he was in the classroom teaching it, so you could hear students' questions in the background, and it wasn't like distracting or anything. He would cut out the parts that were unnecessary, but it was really just a learning curve, and he was always available. You could email him and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this problem on the quiz. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And he'll say, send me your work and I'll tell you where you went wrong. Because it wasn't when you get home, it's not about whether or not you can finish the test. It's whether or not you can understand what you're doing by yourself. And so what I liked about some of the teachers that I had, and this is something parents can do, and if you're a teacher and you're watching, this would be great, always be available to your students, because having him right there all the time, although it's not practical for that sudden change, the sudden change wasn't practical, so having him right there was really helpful.
And be there, as she's saying, can be like being there for a video and being able to give the recording or give the access.
Yeah, I was able to call him on Google Meet if I seriously could not figure my homework out.
Co-ops were a big part of homeschool, and that's where different families come together. And that's really helpful if you feel that you are not strong in an area. So when different families come together, you may have one person teaching this subject that they're stronger in, and vice versa. So everyone is being able to get the best of their subject areas. We did that with 3 other families. There were 4 families.
I think so.
So we started our own co-op. You can start your own with some of your community and your friends that are around. You can also join one that's already established. And even with COVID at this point and the pandemic out, you can still do it virtually. You could do Zoom co-ops. It gives socialization. It also gives extra help and support in areas that you may not be as strong in. And it also gives a breakup of constantly you being the only access as far as the educational instruction for your children. And so that's very important. That's very helpful, especially as you're dealing with the stressful aspects of homeschool, because it can be stressful. It can be joyous, but it can be stressful. One of the things I often say is, with homeschool, you will have some days where you're like, oh yes, I am the best parent in the world. I am on fire.
I remember those days.
Mm-hmm. And then you
come out with a whole notebook.
Yes, like
this is what we're doing at this time. We have your breaks scheduled. Trust me, you might think it's bad now, but when you are in those scheduled breaks, you're gonna be thanking me.
I was loving it. And then I would have those days where I would feel like, oh my goodness, I'm failing my children.
Grace would be under the table. I'd be up at the computer. Mom, I don't understand algebra.
Life is over. But that was a natural part of the flow of everything. All in all, I believe that the majority of the end result of homeschool was positive for my crew. We decided as a whole, and I loved it, we took it 1 year at a time. And so that's something that's very important for each and every one of you, you have to judge your children based off of their individual needs. And I'm always a supporter and encourager of that. Your child's needs, and you know your child, your interactions. If you feel that you can't be positive in your interactions with your child because you're frustrated or because you have a short fuse with that, it's very important to take those things into consideration as you're teaching them. Because one thing my mom always instilled in me was that learning should be an enjoyable event at every stage. Because what you don't want to do is have your children grow to have a hatred or a great dislike towards whatever it is that they're doing as it relates to education. Now, they may naturally not like something, but as far as just having that stress and negativity as, oh, this is horrible, those are things you definitely want to avoid. Again, I'm not one for statistics, so I'm not going to give you numbers, but one of the things, and this is especially important for students of color, there is a statistic out. I don't know the numbers. I'm not going to tell you because I don't know. I'll just throw out any number. But
17.
No, it has to be a larger number.
44.
Larger.
73?
73% of all children of color need more so of confidence as it relates to the outcome of their performance. It's more of a confidence. Their confidence needs to be boosted, and then their performance will be higher in school versus other students who need different sort of motivations. Okay. And so when you're working with your children at home, confidence is a big thing. And that's something that I can share. So the reason why I homeschooled. My son is my middle child. And so Brianna she's always been my nerd. Okay. And I love it. So to us, that's a term of endearment because I say I'm raising nerds and I love it.
Yes. I would always watch movies and wonder why they were picking on the nerds when really that's going to be their boss one day. So
right.
Like,
nerds are the cool people.
Exactly.
So for us, that's a term of endearment. But Brianna was always that kind of kid that she wanted to learn just for the fun of it. When she was little, like at 2 years old, she wanted learning workbooks as her playtime. You were. That was always her thing. She always loved to read. Those were things that drove her. So she would have challenges, and she has had challenges in school, but her mindset was, oh, I'm going to show you. Okay. My son, who's under her, very smart, but he liked what he liked. And he was only going to give you the motivation if he saw that you invested in him, that you really cared. And if you didn't, he didn't give you anything. And so his work product would suffer. And
that's a good way to put that. I never really thought about Evan like that, but
that's Evan.
Because Evan will hate a subject, and the next year he gets a really good teacher, and it's just like, you know what? Math isn't that bad. Thank you, Miss Julia.
Right. Thank you, Miss Julia. So that was just his thing. But when he was younger, he found himself having a lot of challenges. He was younger. He was bigger than most of the kids there. I had a young black male son, and he was big and he was very active. And so there were lots of different ideas behind how I should approach that for him. But I was a strong believer that my kid should be allowed to be a kid, and that he should be poured into with everything that he could. Like he was saying earlier, I knew what he was capable of, and I didn't accept anything less. But the challenge was not all, but some of his teachers, a particular school year, just was negative. She didn't like kids in general, but that's a whole nother subject.
She was a bully. She would start stuff for no reason, and it's just like, they're literally second graders. Why are you, it's not like they're in high school when teachers actually argue with their students and it actually is kind of funny. It's like, he had to leave the class because of some situation and something like that. And she told all her students, yeah, he was being a disruption, when that was not the case.
Right.
She was trying to create allies with second graders. Like, lady, are you, like, is it that bad? Like,
So needless to say, what I did was I moved him to a private school then. And the dynamics of that school, now I love that school. Let's just put it out there.
Shout out.
Okay. But the dynamics of that school, it was the teachers, there was the diversity of the teachers was one white male teacher, one black female teacher, and one Indian teacher. Was she Indian?
Two.
Two.
Miss Aldridge and Miss, the Evans teacher.
They lead teachers.
Oh.
Yeah. So there were 3 people that were not white female. Okay. And so that was the dynamics of the entire class. I mean, of the entire school. Wasn't a problem. The teachers that had sons, the teachers that had brothers, they did great with the boys. But when I'm just giving the dynamics of where we were, I moved him to a private school. Private school had the same dynamics. It was all white female teachers. Nothing against white female teachers. But what I finally came to the realization of is what Evan needed was something that if I kept switching him in different schools, knowing the community and the environment that we were in, he would still lack and miss what he needed. As a young, big, loud black male, and those were characteristics of him.
He was loud.
And just people not being able to understand that it was more of a cultural thing. It was more of he was an energetic young boy because he was a young boy. And so that's when I homeschooled him. When I took him out to homeschool him, he was reading below grade level. He was struggling here and there.
He didn't like to read.
He hated reading. But no, he loved reading bug encyclopedias. That's why I said he was a nerd in a different way.
Well, actually, I think he didn't like really. I still stand by. He didn't like reading. He enjoyed those ginormous like kids bug books at first because there were ginormous pictures and like the fun fact bubbles. And then the encyclopedias he kept because if the book didn't explain something, then he'd go and find it. He didn't really like reading still.
Yeah. But what I did from there is then started giving him more bug books because he did like them. And then I would also I started him on comic books. Now I'll tell you parents, if you decide to go the comic book route, go for it. Just make sure you look at it because comic books are not always kosher.
I remember that one.
So just monitor the comic books. But it grew his interest and he went from seeing comic books to reading 500-page books, and his love is
Percy Jackson.
His love is
Greek
mythology.
No, mythology, because he also loves Norse and Roman mythology.
Well, there you go. So he went from struggling and hating to read and hating school to
now he can tell you every Greek, Roman, and Norse god of the sea, the name of all of them, and he'll tell you if they're related. He'll tell you their family lineage. It's crazy. He went from not loving to read to I know everything about this subject and anything connected to this, I'm going to learn about it. And I don't want to watch a video on it. I want to read it in a book by this author. And so homeschool was an advantage in that way. We had stressful moments, but I was able to kind of hone in on different things. And the way that I did it was, as it relates to the reading part, is I exposed him, all of them, to every possible genre and different style book available. And I just bought books. And eventually, he found what his niche was. How did he find that? Like, what was it?
I think because it grew from the comics. I don't know.
Because he didn't start with The Lightning Thief. He started with there are like 3 series that tie in together and then build a series. And he started with like an off series, and he was just like...
It was very random. So what worked for him may not necessarily work for your child, but the point is definitely keep them exposed. I thought he would like sports books because he always liked sports.
I remember that phase.
Sports was not... I bought a bunch of sports books, and that wasn't his interest. He would read some here and there, and as he grew to like reading more, then he opened up and he was willing to read other things. One thing for stressing that I would say, Monique, in particular, is spending so much time together can be stressful. And especially if you never get a breather. And I think COVID does a lot of this, but homeschooling does as well, because it's that work atmosphere. And especially if you as a parent have other things to do. I ended up doing some other jobs that would allow me more flexibility to be with my children. But we were together
24/7.
all day, every day.
We had to schedule alone time. Like, go to your room. And it wouldn't be like a go to your room. It'd be like a, hey, now's the time to do your own thing. Okay. And it would be so grateful.
Monique, so how many hours did you physically work and how many subjects a day? And did you block schedule or not? So with the hours, the difference between homeschool and traditional school is you have a much smaller number. So you need less hours. You don't have to do a full 6 to 8 hour day because you only have 1 or 2 kids that you're working with. And so because of that, you don't have the distractions and you don't have as much going on. So honestly, I would say we would do anywhere. It would depend on the day.
It would depend on, well, I guess that's the next question.
It would depend on the day. It would depend on the subject, because we wouldn't necessarily do every subject every day if it didn't totally work. So we may have a day of 4 hours of work with like an hour lunch break in between. But we may also have a day where we work 2 hours. But the joy that I found with homeschool is that might be concentrated work, but as the kid said, everything is a learning experience. So we would even go out to the store or the park. Our field trips would be museums. We would travel the country outside of the country. But it might be a little harder to do that now, but they're virtual field trips that you can go on. You could take drives. I don't know exactly what age groups your kids are, but like I said, this applied to pre-K up to 8th grade. And I was able to relate that across the board for all of them. With our co-ops, parks and recreations typically do stuff. You can go to a park and they have animal science centers. And they'll give you the whole gamut.
Even like the little things, because I saw that you said you had a 4-year-old. It's going to sound weird, but dog parks they are recess. If you think about an elementary school recess, it's slides and probably monkey bars and an open field. Dog parks are an open field. Just dog parks are usually clean, so watch out for that. But Evan, Grace, and I, we always went to the dog park. It was just a fun time to run, do cartwheels, create a imaginary kickball field, and soccer. It was.
And you also have to know your kids. So what I knew was that my kids needed physical exercise to break up their day, especially my younger two, Evan and Grace. So Grace was around the age of your 4-year-old as we were going through this process. And so first thing in the morning, now this is good in any school, first thing in the morning, the first thing that my kids did was some sort of exercise. We would run, we would walk as a family, we would do something.
And we do it late at night too.
Yes, we would end the day like that as well. But to start your day like that is going to be really good, because then they're back and ready to regroup and ready to learn. That's good even if you're not homeschooling your kids.
Can I answer this one?
Yeah, hold on, let me go back to how many subjects a day.
Okay.
How many subjects a day? It would depend on the day. And there was one thing that we also did with homeschooling called unschooling. And that would be a time, and you can even do it with your 4-year-old, but that's where you can do it at any age. That's where their interests drive what they learn. Now, for Brianna, who was middle school age when she was being homeschooled, she had to discover and find learning resources so that she can learn in her unschooling. She taught herself coding. She taught herself sign language. Evan went on the bug track and really focused on learning more about the specific bugs that he liked. And then Grace, I directed her a little more as to what she would do. okay? But you can decide the subjects. If y'all are working on projects, are fantastic, because projects can group in several subjects at once. You know, they can write a report, they can do certain things. So subjects are it depends on what you're working on. If they're working on a really hard something, and that's one of those things, if they're working hours and hours on one thing, break it up. Just break it up.
If they get super stressed, like one thing she always says is step away, it'll become easier. Now me, I did not want to step away until I figured it out. But she would have to literally pull me away and be like, go play for a second. And my other son would be like, I want to play. And I'd be like, no, Mom, I'm going to work. And she'd say, no, take a second, go breathe, and come back, and we're going to work on a different subject, and then you can go back to that. And it really helped.
Okay. Did you want to answer something else before we answer that?
You had said that, what if the 4-year-old's fun time is with you? And I had said when you need to schedule alone time because you'll be always near each other. Schedule a nap time. We always had nap. Well, we didn't always have nap, but it was one
Grace
thing.
did.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Well, it's one thing that we missed. I was in public school for 6th grade, then 7th and 8th grade I was homeschooled. So I went from, where was I? I was in elementary school where nap time wasn't really a thing, and we were like, oh, I kind of miss nap time. And then we went to 6th grade and we were just like, okay, nap time's not going to happen. So when I finally got homeschooled, and there were days where it was just like, I'm beyond tired, I cannot keep my eyes open, schedule a nap time. If you guys need it to be individual or separated from each other, then just like nap, sleep. And I'm sure you would benefit from that. Or while she or he is sleeping, then go ahead and do your work while they are taking their nap.
Honestly, though, the way nap time works the best, again, is if you have worked them for the day. So if you've really put them into exuding energy, then it works really well. And that's why I said start the physical activity. So one of the things, even for us having homeschooled, coming back now, throughout the day, it's been really hard because we're a little more sedative. And so when it comes to night, we're struggling because it's time to go to bed and we haven't. So you asked a question about your son who has special needs and what sort of things. So I've invited, sorry y'all, I'm out of breath running back to the back room and trying to get this chair, moving chairs and furniture. I invited my mom here. She is an expert in special education. She has had over 30 years, no, 40? She's old, over 50 years. Oh my goodness, she's really old. So she has had over 50 years working as a teacher and an educator in both in the classroom. She has worked as a professor of teaching teachers who special education. I'm trying to give
that's
y'all
right.
know I don't know any other stuff, but she'll be able to give you some advice.
Yeah.
She's the bomb.
No.
Go ahead.
Please excuse my appearance. They drugged me out of the room. And the credentials aren't important as far as I'm concerned. What's most important is that children get what they need. And one of the mistakes that we tend to make when it comes to children with special needs is that we tend to hold back for fear that they may be harmed or may not be able to gain from the experience, or they may become frustrated. And I think a rule of thumb is you do whatever you can, and you never know what's going to hit. So for example, if you're doing a field trip, yes, as far as the COVID is concerned, I completely understand that the child may be more susceptible. They may be one of the children who are more likely to catch it. So that I get. But again, the mask, the gloves, the whatever protections that you need to do it. But it may also mean that your selection of a field trip may be one that only involves you and your other children and or your spouse or however it is. So let's say if you wanted to go to a flower garden, it's outdoors, and the millions of things that can be learned just from a flower garden. It is outside. You won't have any other, you'd have to look at it, but not having anybody else be a part of it. Or you can actually download little apps or video clips that tell you about the different flowers. And you guys go through this garden seeing if you can identify those flowers. I'm not sure of the level of special needs of your child, but even a child without language can understand some of the things that you might be able to, that you may be trying to communicate. So I say try whatever you desire. Of course, with reason. I would not put a child who's wheelchair bound on a track and say run with the other kids. That's not reasonable given their disability. But I might have that child in a wheelchair with someone pushing them just so that they could be a part of that joy and that experience. So just keep in mind, don't be so protective that you deny them the opportunity to experience life like all of the rest of us. That's just so very, very important. And when it comes to teaching children with disabilities, making sure that we don't teach to the label, we teach to the need. So the label a lot of times might be dyslexia or learning disabilities or autism. Doesn't tell you a lot about what the child needs. It just gives you a label that says, based on the categories provided by our law, this is where this child falls. And the labels have their places, don't get me wrong. But children with disabilities, regardless of the label, can have processing problems. They can have perceptual problems. They can have language problems. They can have memory problems. So there's a lot that can go on. And my appeal is make sure you try to understand what the need really is and not get so caught up in the label. That's really important.
And consistency for all children, but especially students who have special needs, is very important. So your daily schedule should look very consistent.
Absolutely.
If you decide to do a special thing once a week, have it blocked in where one time each week, this is the day we do a specialist excursion, and that can change. But the day to day should look very consistent with each other. And that's for students with special needs and students without special needs. Consistency is the key. Brianna over here can definitely attest to that. She
I
did
just
not
wrote
like
an
the
essay
change.
like that.
Well, it's. I just saw your comment that she's nonverbal and has not kept on a mask yet. I understand that. You may want to try a shield because typically children, I'm not sure if she has sensory problems as well, but a lot of times children with disabilities, they can't take things that are that close in
Explain
place.
the shield.
Huh?
Explain
The shield that covers the entire face, or I'm not sure if she's mobile, but they can, like if she's wheelchair bound, for example, putting a plastic shield, a shield over the front of her wheelchair. But it still allows her to be able to go there. I'll tell a quick story and I'll leave this. Out of my 50 years of teaching the entire gamut of individuals with disabilities, as well as with the elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and grad school, there's one child that taught me the best lesson I know with regard to understanding children with disabilities. It was a nonverbal child, and it was during my one of my internships in Greensboro, North Carolina. I would give my right foot to see that young lady right now. Her name was Tracy. And when I went in, I felt immediately great, I'll just use the word pity because of what the cooperating teacher told me. but sadness for the girl. And I was trying to take care of her, and I was, you know, doing everything for her, and all she would do is just squeal. But that little girl took me up one tree and down another. I couldn't get her to do anything. It was just such a hard experience. And this was a Friday. I went to the cooperating teacher and I said, what is it that I can't get Tracy? Why can't I get Tracy to do anything? What have I done? What is it that she just doesn't like me? And the teacher said this and walked away. She said, Tracy wants you to be her teacher. She does not want your pity. That was it. And she walked away. That thing floored me. And that weekend I went home and I prepared a whole different set of instructions for Tracy. And Tracy, that Monday morning, she met me at the door ready to take me on that roller coaster ride. But I was ready for her. I was like, oh, no, ma'am, you can learn just like everybody else. And I started. And for the rest of my internship it was a practicum with that young lady, I consider her the biggest success of my educational career, but also my best teacher. And so that's why I tell people all the time, don't try to think you understand what they want. Just allow the experience. And if you allow it and you give them, you know, the appropriate safeguards, but allow the experience. They want us to teach them. They do not want our pity. So that's why I'm such a big believer in you let children experience whatever, and that learning will be discovered through the experiences that we afford them.
Thank you. And we might have her join us again, but I thought that would be a really good piece since we were talking about just some expertise on students with special needs. So I believe that is kind of homeschool in a nutshell. We will definitely be available for questions via this chat line. You could definitely text or comment on more questions, and we'll come back. We might do more on this segment since it's received such good attention. We might do more segments on this just to help educate parents and maybe help parents out in knowing what to do. So we wanted to come back just to help that. This has been Conversations with Kids. I'm Tonya Nicole.
And I'm Brianna Fuel.
All right, this is the Bee Lady, and we will see you later. Peace.
How do we turn this off again? Do we just...
Why do y'all pick on me every time?
Is it right? Is it?
I learned. You just press finish.